deaf, callous, insensitive. The reactions to the recent hike in bank rates have definitely not been positive. Opposition Member of Parliament Fitz Jackson has been calling for a change to the Banking Services Act for years and joins us now with his perspective on the recent hike. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Smile Jamaica. Hope you're well, sir.
I'm well. Thanks much. Good morning to you, Delia, and to your listeners.
Yep. Sir, you've been complaining about the fees, the bank fees, for years. Are you suggesting that we shouldn't be paying any money at all if I'm going to take money out of an ATM, my own money? Or are you suggesting that the fees are too high? Where did you start with this one?
The former is the point. After extensive review by a bipartisan committee of Parliament, one of the recommendations is that all deposit holders be provided with a minimum service package. And that minimum service package is premised on the fact that on making their deposits to the banks have the opportunity to use their money invested for their own profit making. And for that, at the very minimum, all deposit holders should have a minimum level of service per month, per year, against their accounts, providing for a minimum level of transactions without any fee, which would include deposits, which would include withdrawals, which would include account inquiries, which would include encashing a check drawn on the same bank without any penalty by way of a fee, etc.
So no fees at all?
No fees at all for transactions.
Okay, yeah.
Accounts.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, following up on that question from Neville, so if it's yesterday, we saw the Banking Association coming out and saying, no, but hold on a minute, we have been absorbing costs in COVID. It's been difficult on us. And even now what we're saying we're going to charge you is below what the real costs are. How do you respond to that?
You know, that is so unfortunate. It's an argument that they have raised from the very beginning. They are treating the transaction that account holders make with the bank as a service they are providing for the customer without regard to the fact that they have the account holders' monies in their accounts for their own use. Mm-hmm. Every business, a manufacturing business, a service provider, etc., they have operating costs. They have utilities to pay, light, water, telephone, salaries. They have promotional budgets, marketing budgets. They have monies to buy the machines to count the money. They have saved in their business. Those are what you call investment capital at first, and those are recurring operating expense. So when you apply for a license from the Bank of Jamaica to set up a bank, you acknowledge those as part of your operating expenses. You must say to the customers, for being able to take your monies on a license from the government, which is government of the people, voted for by the people, a minimum amount of protection must be provided for those monies in your institution. Mm-hmm. And customers must be able to use their monies without any penalties. By the way, I want to make the point that the bill does not speak to transactional fee for banking instruments provided by the banks, such as a loan, a mortgage, an overdraft facility, and other kinds of financial instruments provided by the banks where their monies are at stake and where the banks is providing a service against the bank's money. The bill doesn't speak to that. The bill simply says, I must be able to make a minimum amount of deposits, a minimum amount of withdrawals. I must be able to encash a check drawn on your bank without a fee for encashing it. And by the way, I've tabled some questions in the House to the Minister, because I've asked the Bank of Jamaica through its governor a few weeks ago at the Standing Financial Committee, what say you on the Bill Exchange Act that prohibits or rather requires you meaning a bank, to pay the face value of a promissory note issued by the bank. So if you get a check for $2,000, you expect to get a $2,000 in return. Mm-hmm. Just as though I give $2,000 in cash, a check ought to have the same value to the payee as the cash. Only thing is that you use a safer instrument of the check rather than a cash.
Yeah.
Up to now, there's no response. And inside table the same questions before the minister. Why is it that the government has not sought to have the banks refund the dormancy fee that they elected, they illegally collected from customers? Tons of fees that they collected from dormant accounts and put in their pockets, in their coffers. Why is it if Mr. Oles and Mr. Clark has any real concern for the depositors, cause them to refund the money as a breach of the law? I am now in the business of engaging legal personnel to carry that matter before the court. I shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
The government should simply ask for a judicial review. Is this a breach of the law? If the review say yes, it was a breach, to ask them to return those ill-gotten gains. Yeah. Where is the Minister of Finance? Yeah. I was yesterday, as if they were asleep and just woke up to bank fees.
Yeah.
Can you...
Mr. Jackson, you mentioned the Prime Minister, you mentioned the Minister of Finance. They both have come out and said they're not too impressed with the hike. Will that now make a difference, you think, because it's coming from the government side?
No. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance need to do a lot more. They both have been aware of this issue from a long time, and they have been mute. They have been dead silent while all these charges are being made. I'm not surprised if tomorrow or next week, hear an announcement, banks are going to stay the increases. They are going to roll back the increases, which serves for nothing more than an appeasement to appear to be doing something. It is like the salesman who jack up the price for the thing by 10% and then announce a sale the next day to remove the 10% that he had on the high price before, and you think you get a deal. And that's a game that is being played. That's an insult that is being foisted on the people of this country. Those fees ought not to be there for depositors to begin with. So the Prime Minister to say, I am incensed. Where have you been all the time?
You've been trying to push an amendment to the Banking Services Act, sir, I think since 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I tabled the private member's motion first in 2013.
Right.
Referred it to the Economy and Production Committee for review to be done by the Bank of Jamaica and deliberate, because I never want the utterances to be just loose, uninformed. I asked the Bank of Jamaica to lead that exercise. Out of that review by the Bank of Jamaica, and having gone through extensive consultation with all the financial institutions, consumer groups, private members of the society, we came up with a clutch of recommendations in that report, tabled by the then opposition member, Mr. Carl Samuda, who was chairman of the committee. All I did, is to take that clutch of recommendations coming out of the committee's work and put it in a bill to seek to give effect to what we agreed on. And the very same members, including Mr. Shaw, including Mr. Vaz, including Mr. Samuda, who signed the report, and it's a matter of public record. The report that they signed asking for these particular steps to be taken with the minimum service package. They are the ones that, upon becoming government, abandoned those recommendations, surrendered to the lobby of the banks, and leave the deposit holders on their own. Mr. Oles knew about this all along. Mr. Clark knows about it all along. I have spoken to both gentlemen directly in person about this. They're not making any grand discovery. Why the pretense?
Final question, sir, from me anyway, and unfortunately the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance not here to defend themselves. But what happens now? What happens now? What should happen now?
What should happen and what ought to happen is that the bipartisan developed bill before the House, reflecting the strenuous work of both sides of the divide, just put the bill to the vote when we meet on Tuesday next. Pass the bill and sign it into law at the soonest possible time. And much of what we're talking about that is unreasonable would have been resolved by law. The Prime Minister don't have to appeal to the banks. The Minister of Finance don't have to appeal to the banks. The people of this country elected all of us to protect them, not to go beg the banks to be sympathetic. Our job as elected representatives is to protect the interests of the ordinary people, protect the pensioners, protect the marginally employed, protect this micro business operator, protect the small business operator whose business activities are being undermined by the eroding impact of these fees. That's all to be done. It can be done, but it requires courage.
Thank you, sir.
As will.
Thank you, sir.
As balls.
Thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Stay safe, sir. God bless you.
My pleasure.
Opposition Member of Parliament, Fitz Jackson.
Up next on Smile, a young woman who turned her life around. Daily will have that one. You'll be right back. Stay with us, please.